The world is coming undone. Imperial flags reign across the galaxy.
Can you be trusted without your shackles?
Let's just get this over with, shall we?
We've a mission for you. A major weapons test is imminent.
Rogue One, a Star Wars story, is a standalone cinematic chapter that expands the Star Wars universe by focusing on an event long referenced but never fully explored on screen: the desperate mission to steal the Death Star plans. Unlike the episodic saga centered on the Skywalker lineage, this film positions itself as a grounded war story, emphasizing sacrifice, uncertainty, and the human cost of rebellion. Its tone is noticeably darker and more mature, presenting the galactic civil war not as a mythic backdrop but as an active, brutal conflict where victory is never guaranteed and survival is rare. Set immediately before the events of the original 1977 Star Wars film, the story reframes familiar history through new perspectives. The narrative explores how intelligence, espionage, and moral compromise shape the rebellion's earliest successes. Rather than focusing on Jedi, prophecy, or destiny, the film concentrates on ordinary individuals forced into extraordinary circumstances, reinforcing the idea that the rebellion was built not only by heroes remembered in legend, but also by those whose names were lost to history. At the center of the story is Jyn Erso, a woman shaped by abandonment, survival, and mistrust. Her father, Jyn Erso, is a brilliant scientist coerced by the Empire into working on the Death Star project. Believed by many to be a willing collaborator, Jyn secretly sabotages the superweapon from within, embedding a fatal weakness into its design. This quiet act of resistance becomes the emotional and narrative core of the film, reframing the Death Star's destruction as the result of deliberate sacrifice rather than fortunate coincidence. Jyn's journey begins with her arrest by Imperial forces and subsequent extraction by the Rebel Alliance, who view her primarily as a tool rather than an ally. Her introduction to the rebellion is uneasy, exposing internal divisions and ethical compromises within the movement itself. The rebels are not portrayed as universally noble. Instead, they are shown as fractured, fearful, and sometimes ruthless, mirroring the complexities of real-world resistance movements. Cassian Andor, a seasoned rebel intelligence officer, represents this moral ambiguity. He is pragmatic, hardened, and willing to do morally questionable things for what he believes is the greater good. His dynamic with Jyn evolves from mutual distrust to shared purpose, underscoring one of the film's key themes: unity forged through necessity. Cassian's internal conflict, particularly his struggle with guilt and loyalty, adds depth to the rebellion's portrayal as an organization fighting not only an external enemy, but also its own conscience. Supporting characters further enrich the story's emotional and ideological layers. Chirrut, a blind warrior monk who believes deeply in the Force, represents faith in an age where Jedi are largely extinct. His companion, Baze Malbus, is a heavily armed realist who has lost that faith, creating a quiet philosophical contrast between belief and skepticism. Their relationship demonstrates how hope can persist even when traditional symbols of it have vanished. The reprogrammed Imperial droid K2SO provides levity without undermining the film's seriousness. His dry humor and blunt honesty highlight the absurdity and cruelty of war, while also reinforcing the idea that loyalty can be constructed, learned, and chosen. Despite being a machine, K2SO's arc ultimately reflects the same theme of sacrifice that defines the human characters. The antagonist's presence is anchored by director Orson Krennic, an ambitious Imperial officer obsessed with recognition and legacy. Unlike Sith Lords driven by ideology or mysticism, Krennic is motivated by ego and fear of irrelevance. His rivalry within the Empire illustrates the internal power struggles that exist even within authoritarian regimes. Darth Vader's limited but impactful appearances reinforce the terror of the Empire, serving as a reminder of its overwhelming power rather than dominating the narrative. Visually and stylistically, the film distinguishes itself from other Star Wars entries through its war film aesthetic. Battle scenes are chaotic, tactical, and often bleak, emphasizing the cost of conflict rather than the spectacle of heroism. The final act on the tropical world of Scarif stands out as a large-scale military operation that combines ground combat, space warfare, and espionage into a single, relentless sequence. This climax reinforces the inevitability of loss, even in moments of victory. The plot steadily builds toward its tragic conclusion, making it clear that the mission's success requires total sacrifice. One by one, the characters fall, not in grand heroic gestures, but in desperate attempts to buy time for the transmission of the Death Star plans. Their deaths are not sensationalized. Instead, they are portrayed as the quiet, painful price of resistance. This approach strengthens the emotional resonance of the ending, transforming the familiar opening crawl of the original Star Wars into a moment earned through blood and resolve. The film was released in 2016 and positioned as the first standalone Star Wars story outside the episodic saga. Its release marked a strategic expansion of the franchise, demonstrating that Star Wars could support diverse genres and tones while remaining true to its core identity. Anticipation for the film was high, as audiences were eager to see how a known outcome could still deliver tension and emotional impact. The promotional materials, including the trailer, emphasized urgency, scale, and a grittier tone than audiences were accustomed to. The imagery focused heavily on war-torn environments, desperate expressions, and the looming presence of the Death Star. The trailer avoided revealing the full scope of the story, instead leaning into atmosphere and mood, which helped set expectations for a more serious and grounded experience. In terms of cast, the film assembled a diverse ensemble led by Felicity Jones as Jyn Erso and Diego Luna as Cassian Andor. Their performances grounded the film emotionally, balancing vulnerability with resolve. The supporting cast, including Donnie Yen, Wen Jiang, Riz Ahmed, Ben Mendelsohn, and Alan Tudyk, contributed distinct personalities that made the ensemble feel cohesive, despite limited screen time for each character. The casting choices reinforce the idea of a rebellion composed of individuals from different backgrounds united by necessity rather than ideology alone. From a factual standpoint, the film's production was notable for its emphasis on practical effects, real locations, and a visual style inspired by the original trilogy. This approach helped bridge the aesthetic gap between modern filmmaking techniques and the tactile feel of the earlier films. The musical score echoed familiar themes while introducing new motifs that emphasized tension, loss, and determination rather than triumph. Rogue One's legacy within the Star Wars canon is significant. It retroactively deepens the narrative of the original trilogy by providing context to one of its most critical plot points. The revelation that the Death Star's weakness was intentional reframes the rebellion's victory as the result of collective sacrifice rather than accidental design. This narrative choice strengthens the emotional continuity of the saga without undermining the achievements of the original heroes. The film also demonstrated that Star Wars stories could end without traditional victory or survival, opening the door for more experimental storytelling within the franchise. Its success validated the idea that audiences were willing to engage with darker themes, morally complex characters, and tragic endings, as long as the story remained emotionally honest and thematically consistent. Ultimately, Rogue One, a Star Wars story, stands as a testament to the unseen heroes of the galaxy. It is a story about people who did not expect to be remembered, who fought not for glory, but for the possibility of hope. By focusing on sacrifice over celebration and realism over myth, the film carved out a unique identity within the Star Wars universe, proving that even in a galaxy defined by legends, the smallest acts of courage can change the course of history.